Hey guys, in this episode, we're going to be talking about a glimmer of hope that we have finally seen on our journey with federal student loans over the past several months. But before we do, over the last several months, we've gotten a lot of requests for one on one sessions to talk about people's specific student loan strategy. We haven't had a lot of availability to do that in recent months. We've been in the middle of spring reviews with our clients over at New Money, New Problems, our financial advisory firm. But in these summer months, we have more availability. So we are opening up my schedule for one-on-one sessions. If you're interested, you can go to escapestudentloandebt.com/session. There will be two options. One of them will be an abbreviated 20, 25-minute phone call. We're not going to review anything in advance. It will literally just be bring your questions to the call and I'll do my best to answer them. And an extended session that will be an hour-long review where you will be able to submit documents in advance, like your tax return, your student loan statements, or whatever you're comfortable sending, so that I can have more information on hand to give you a strategy that I feel would be worthwhile. So once again, go to escapestudentloandebt.com/session to sign up. And now let's get into this week's episode. Are your student loan payments or loan balances a major obstacle in your financial life? Then tune in and let's escape student loan debt. All right, welcome to this week's episode. My name is Brenton Harrison of Escape Student Loan Debt and your host for the Escape Student Loan Debt podcast. I feel much better today than I did yesterday because when I woke up yesterday morning, the student loan world was still hell. And today there is at least a glimmer of hope that tells us there's a possibility that there's some recourse out there for at least current federal student loan borrowers that we did not think was there a few weeks ago. So before we even get into some of those updates that are positive news that came out yesterday afternoon, I want to first tell you some other updates that are quick hitting but still relevant to you as a borrower. The first is we've talked in recent episodes about the fact that the Department of Education is having to give monthly updates as to their progress for processing applications to switch onto other income-driven repayment plans or to sign up for the first time, and also their progress towards processing applications for public service loan forgiveness buyback requests. Well, the positive news is that they are still showing an increase in the number of applications processed. So they are actually, doing the work. The bad news is they're not doing it fast enough because they have actually gone backwards in terms of how many outstanding applications there are. So essentially, they're getting applications coming in faster than they're actually processing them. So while there has been an increase in the number that they've processed, the gap in terms of how many they have left to go has actually grown. So little positive news there, little negative news there. It is still working, but unfortunately, if you are just submitting an application today, you might be actually further back in the queue than if you had done it last month. Another quick update, and this is a fully positive update in my opinion, if true. Elizabeth Warren gave an update last week stating that she had spoken to Linda McMahon of the Department of Education, who shared with her that she didn't give a date, but eventually they are planning to return the income-driven repayment plan tracker to the studentaid.gov website, which is great news, if for no other reason than to get an idea for where this current administration sees you in terms of your progress towards income-driven repayment plan forgiveness. If you are aware, you know that the income-driven repayment plan tracker was only up for a couple of months, but it's something that people have been asking for years. They took it down. So being able to see that tracker again will definitely be good news to know whether you have 10 years left to go, 15 years left to go, so on and so forth, and to be able to use your NSLDS database file to compare to what the Department of Education shows as your progress, and if needed, make a case for that number to be altered. So that is good news for people who have been missing that tracker since they took it down. And now we can get to the thing that we're here to talk about today. And this is a Senate rule that I had no idea existed until yesterday afternoon. But man, I'm glad I know about it now. And that rule is the Byrd rule. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring up a description of this rule from an article that was posted yesterday because I don't want to be describing something I just found out existed. So if you're looking on screen, and we'll share this link in the show notes, what the Byrd rule says. And I quote, "The Byrd rule is a Senate procedural rule that limits what can be included in a budget reconciliation bill. The rule prevents provisions that do not primarily impact government spending or revenues or that increase the deficit beyond a 10-year window. It also bars any extraneous matter, which is defined by the parliamentarian via a 6-part test. Now, end quote. The reason that's important is because essentially what they're saying is the One Big Beautiful Bill Act is a budget reconciliation act. And there are certain things that they can put in that act if they impact spending or revenues. But if there's something that they are taking from a constituent, meaning they are stripping a constituent of their rights for something that does not impact revenues, then it's something that cannot be passed by a simple majority. It has to be passed by a 60-vote majority in the Senate. Why is that important? Number one, is it impossible to get a 60-vote majority in the Senate for some of the things we've been talking about with federal student loans? No, it's not impossible. But is it more difficult than a simple majority? It is much more difficult than a simple majority because it would require even moderate state Republicans, purple state Republicans, to be able to vote for something that's going to take away major options from their constituents in terms of repayment for federal student loans. So let's go away from this article and let's talk about some of the major issues that we've been covering in recent episodes that have been impacted by this Byrd ruling. One of the huge things that we've been talking about are the payment plan options for current federal student loan borrowers moving forward. Right now, a current federal student loan borrower has access to the old or new version of income-based repayment, the pay-as-you-earn plan, and the income contingent repayment plan. Now, in both the House and Senate versions of the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, they were proposing doing away with several of those plans, and for current borrowers, only giving them access to either the newly created repayment assistance plan or the old version of income-based repayment. Either one of those would have been damaging to people who are currently eligible for pay-as-you-earn or new IBR because it would represent, in many cases, at least a 5% increase in terms of the amount of your discretionary income you're paying towards your loans each year, and at minimum, a 5-year increase in the length of repayment as compared to pay-as-you-earn and new IBR. For future borrowers, they were saying that they wouldn't even have access to old IBR, and instead they would only have access to repayment assistance plan. The next thing that they were recommending, among several changes to federal student loan repayment, would be that for people who are in medical and dental residency, even if you were paying your loans using an income-driven repayment plan, even if your loans were direct loans, which are the 3 requirements for an eligible payment under public service loan forgiveness, they would not give you credit towards PSLF for any periods that you were paying during medical or dental residency. Makes no sense, but this is something that was in that bill for current and future borrowers. Next, something that is just, we haven't even talked about this on the podcast, but it's been something, if you keep up with other federal student loan specialists in the space, they've been covering in more detail than I have in recent weeks, Parent Plus borrowers. Originally, what they said was with Parent Plus borrowers, if you were not on an income-driven repayment plan by the time these changes that we just talked about were put in place, you would lose access to those plans forever. And that is a very big deal for several reasons. First off, if you lose access to an income-driven repayment plan, that means that you lose access to income-driven repayment plan forgiveness. It also means, because one of the requirements of public service loan forgiveness is that you be paying back loans using IDR plans, that Parent Plus borrowers would lose access to public service loan forgiveness. And if you're looking at some of the options that are available to someone who might have taken out loans for their child, but now they're retired or they're trying to retire, they're really left with just a standard repayment plan or refinancing with a private lender and paying hundreds, if not thousands more a month than they were initially intending to pay when they took out the loans with the expectation they would be able to use IDR plans to pay them back. So it was already monumental to say that if you haven't already taken your Parent Plus loan and situated it so that you were on an income-driven repayment plan, you were going to lose access. And we have been telling people in recent weeks, even if you haven't done the double consolidation loophole, which you can use to get access to any income-driven repayment plan, our recommendation was to at least consolidate your Parent Plus loan and sign up for even the income contingent repayment plan so that you were technically in an IDR plan before the change was made and you wouldn't lose access forever. Now, upon further reading, people dug into the language regarding Parent Plus loans in the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, and the interpretation was that there was the potential that the language was even more punishing than initially thought. And the reason it was in this, and the reason they felt that is based on the wording in the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, it implied that you wouldn't just lose access to ICR if you weren't on an income-driven repayment plan by the time the changes were made. It was potentially that you would lose access to income-driven repayment plans if you were not specifically on income contingent repayment with an in-payment status on your loans at the time that the change was made. And this applied to both Parent Plus loans that were consolidated to get access to an IDR plan, and consolidated loans that were the result of what was originally a Parent Plus loan, meaning double consolidated loans. And this opened up a whole new list of potentially negative possibilities, because it's saying, no, it doesn't even matter if you're on IBR, old or new. It doesn't matter if you're on pay as you earn. It doesn't matter if you're on save forbearance. If you're not specifically in ICR at the time of the change, you lose access forever, which has led to several specialists in recent weeks saying, even if you double consolidated your loans and you're on pay as you earn, just in case we're reading this correctly, you need to come off of pay as you earn and go onto income contingent repayment. And that is a terrible payment plan as compared to pay as you earn, where you take your discretionary income and you subtract 150% of the federal poverty level and you pay 10% of what remains. With income contingent repayment, you take your discretionary income, you don't even get to subtract 1.5% of the federal poverty level. You just get to subtract the federal poverty level itself. And then you have to pay 20% of that remaining number, which is a substantially higher payment in almost all cases. So it's a really, really terrible plan. So all of these things are the things that were on the table for current borrowers. And then the Byrd rule was called out by the Senate parliamentarian. So they are saying that these changes that are instituted for current borrowers are stripping rights from them in a way that does not impact revenues. And as a result, they have to go to the current borrowers and they have to make sure that those rights are restored unless they are passed by a 60-vote majority in the Senate. So where does this leave us? Again, this doesn't mean that it can't pass, and the Senate is not required to listen to the parliamentarian. But if they do, and from my brief 12 hours worth of research, they typically do, it would mean that for current federal student loan borrowers, they would retain access to the income-driven repayment plans that are currently on the table. If you're a Parent Plus borrower, you wouldn't have to worry about potentially taking your student loan out of save forbearance and putting it on the ICR plan just because you're worried that you might lose access to everything. It would also mean that for people who are pursuing PSLF as medical and dental residents, they would still be able to count that time in their training as years credit towards the 10 years needed before loans are forgiven under PSLF. That right would be, I won't even say restored because it hasn't been taken away yet. It would remain in place. So that is a huge positive. Now, the negative is they're talking about stripping rights from current borrowers, which would mean that if you are a future borrower, you would still be in a position where you would only have access to the repayment assistance plan when it comes to income-driven repayment plan, which means that some of the things that I've said about just having a very negative perspective on the prospects of attending college moving forward, unless you're going to a really, really cost-effective school, or you have a scholarship and it's not costing you a lot of money to go, or you have somebody else paying for you in full, that changes things. But if you're a future borrower who is planning to go to a place where you're borrowing significant funds, it's just not something that I would pursue in the way that we've done it in years past. But this is a huge opportunity and a huge glimmer of hope. I don't know if you can technically have a huge glimmer of hope, but you know what I mean, for people out there who have a payment under pay as you earn that might go up 50, 75% if they were stuck with old IBR or the repayment assistance plan. And it gives me some measure of encouragement, especially because in our most recent webinar, one of the things that I said was, hey, things look really bleak right now, but if I were you and you were eligible for pay as you earn or new income-based repayment, I would still try to get on those plans, just hoping that something changes with what we're seeing currently and you're grandfathered into that status. And it looks like that actually may be the case. So I'm slightly encouraged. I'm still hesitant to say that things are truly looking better. They're looking a little better than they did yesterday morning. And for that, I am grateful. So we're going to keep giving you these updates as they come into our inbox. But most importantly, if you have questions about your individual student loans and want some one-on-one insights, you can go to escapestudentloandebt.com/session, and we will be glad to help. I'll see you soon. From Escape Student Loan Debt, This was the Escape Student Loan Debt Podcast, a show for established professionals whose student loan payments or loan balances are impacting their marriage, their business, their credit, or their dream of achieving homeownership.